Hey guys, my name is Jennifer Schneider, and I'm here with you to talk a little bit about the handoff between marketing and sales, powered by Process, Salesforce, and Pardot. Glad you could make it here today. Look forward to talking with you guys through the session. All right, so let's talk about our agenda. Now, probably one of the most arguable points of contention for any company: when does marketing hand off a lead to sales? Do we have enough intel, or what is our criteria as a company to know when that transition should occur? In addition, what are we doing with the 50 to 65% of contacts or existing leads that live in our database that aren't getting any attention? What happens when someone re-engages with us that is already a lead or a contact in our database? In today's session, we explore a few tactical options to help align this process specific to leads and contacts. We'll explore Path, a native feature to the Sales Cloud platform that you may or may not be using today. We then circle back to why it is so important for marketing to be a part of the sales process and the configuration of your lead path, the fields that support it, and both the marketer and sales are aware of what each status means and who is responsible during each. This is what I like to call reinforcing your business process by configuring your CRM to enable adoption and visibility across departments. So let's get to it. First, take this little quiz. Ask yourselves these questions and answer honestly. Now, most companies will answer no to not one, but most of these questions. How did you rate? Understanding how your Salesforce lead, contact, and opportunity objects are configured and what role they play into the business process should be a foundational part of your process. Since you are often the first touch of net new, as well as the first touch after a re-engagement, the journey to sale starts and is controlled by you. So you ask, how do I coordinate with sales? All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about net new and existing leads. Let's take a second to explain what these mean to me. These are just my favorite lead statuses. Now remember, your company needs to meet as a team to determine these statuses and understand what they mean. So let's walk through a few together. Net new marketing queue nurture. Now, these are net new leads that we need more information on. At this point, we may only have a name and an email. These leads are actually assigned to a queue so that marketing can report on the engagement of their assets on the platform. They're also searchable, so sales could see if the lead exists, but they are living in their own area until we gather the required information for them to get them to the next status. Now remember this, we're going to come back to this concept. The next is re-engage. This is when you have a slew of old leads just chilling in your Salesforce org that have re-engaged over a period of time. Don't ever create duplicate leads on purpose. That is another session entirely. The next status is MQL sales working. At this point, we have enough information to hand off to our sales team or our inside sales team to work. They have a particular cadence that they need to follow to gather more data and determine next steps. We then have closed and unqualified. Pretty obvious there. The next is SQL Opportunity on conversion. This status is selected once an opportunity has been established, right before conversion. Some companies may use this status to hand off to field sales, where they view the SQL leads on a daily basis, and then the director converts the lead to a contact and creates an opportunity at the same time, tying that contact to the contact role related list on the opportunity object. And the last is converted. This is a status that you may want to use when you convert a lead to a contact, but there's not really an opportunity present. Some companies find this useful when a lead is part of a top account or part of their ABM strategy. They might find it more valuable to convert that to a contact and add them to that account for marketing and tracking purposes of all engagement for that particular account. All right. Now, queues. I love queues. Talk to all my clients. I talk about queues all the time. If you have an inside sales team that works your contacts under MQL or MQC status, assigning those related tasks, they can share those in a queue. Note the supported objects in a column. So we're relating those to either leads or contacts as an owner, but you can also store your tasks there so that a group of inside sales folks can work those tasks. All right, so let's talk about what about those new and existing contacts. We have to always think about someone who's net new and someone who also lives within our database. So let's run through these. We're not going to run through each one, but let's take a second to explain what these mean to me. And just like last time, your company, it may be a little bit different. But the most important thing that we take away here is that both the marketer and the sales team understand what each status means. New, that's pretty obvious. New contacts in your Salesforce org, and most likely this is going to be your default status. Now, with the new status at this point, we may still only have a name, company, and email. These contacts are actually assigned to a sales rep. And if they have not gone through the process of being a lead first, in case of like a legacy contact that's been sitting in your system for a while, you may find some of these contacts have this new status. The next is re-engaged. Very similar to what we did before, legacy contacts that have re-engaged with your website, your forms, your digital marketing. This status can be utilized for that. The next is MQC sales working. So at this point, we have enough information to hand off to our inside sales team to work. They might have a particular cadence, like SalesLoft or high velocity sales, and they now know what they need to do to gather more information and engagement. The next is our SQC, which is tied to an opportunity. So we talk a lot about the contact role. It's really neat to be able to also pull those contacts that are currently tied to an opportunity. You could possibly use that as a suppression list or put into a specific nurture of those that are in the opportunity process with your company. The next is marketing nurture. This gives the power back to your sales team to say, you know what, they're not really ready yet, but I want to stay top of mind. Can you guys take over for a while? We're going to click that marketing nurture status. Marketing knows they might have a dynamic list that can pull that in and say, we're going to go ahead and nurture these guys until they're ready. No longer with company, pretty obvious there. All right, so let's compare the two. Notice these are pretty much the same, right? We want to have similar processes for our net new leads and conversion as we do with our regular contacts and leads. When we create processes that are similar and are step-by-step approved, people are able to adopt faster and learn more quickly. All right, before we talk about how these work with marketing a business's process, I want to point out that this is something that is really scalable and easy to do, and you can do it right with the path. Just remember that as a marketer, your job is never done. As your business processes change and you add or subtract items from your tech stack, you're going to think of new ideas, you're going to uncover new use cases, and when you do, take that internal audit of all the things that are affected and the changes that need to be made. Everybody paying attention? We threw a lot at you, and it's hard to sit in front of that monitor all day. So for everyone, here's a little squirrel from me to you. All right, let's talk a little bit about all these statuses and how this fits together. Now that we've dove into such detail around these particular statuses, your next question could probably be, well, how does this fit together? So we're going to introduce the contact and lead path. Now, if you do not currently use Path on the lead and contact objects, this feature is available in Sales Cloud at no extra cost. A lot of you might be already utilizing this on the opportunity object. But Path allows your team to create instructions, call out key fields for each that need to be completed prior to the next status, and it also helps you streamlining training for both sales and marketing. It also allows you to understand and automate when the almighty handoff occurs. Now, since this feature is on the platform, you guessed it, you're going to want to meet with sales, your Salesforce admin, and your marketing team to build this out collectively with everyone's input. And more than likely, your team is going to build this out in Sandbox prior to creating it in live production. So plan for those steps in that change management. So let's take a look at what lead path looks like. Now, as you can see, you're going to match up some of those key fields on the lead object and align them with each status. So the gist of it here is within a particular status, that salesperson and that marketer know which fields of information need to be gathered prior to the next step. We're going to talk a little bit later on in the session on how this applies specific to marketing, but I think you can start to see the pattern. Now, for this example, I've chosen the following fields as key fields to my MQL sales working status: industry, product or products of interest, lead source, last touch lead source, and description. This would mean that prior to creating an opportunity, we would need to have these fields completed. Now, you may have some custom fields and criteria, and this is why it's so important to get your team and admin all in the same room. Marketers need to take heed of what these fields are. We're going to talk about how to use them later. So similar to the lead path, we're also looking at the contact path slide. Now for this example in the contact, we're going to use that same process. I've chosen fields as key fields to my MQC sales working: lead source, last touch lead source, Pardot score, Pardot grade, and description. Now, again, this would mean that prior to creating an opportunity, we would need to have these fields completed. Again, you might have some custom fields that are specific to your company or your process. Make sure that those get into the right status. Lastly, determine who's going to own the path process. Quarterly reviews of adoption and reporting should help define the updates. Now, while usually an admin and activity, be sure that those who are using the path and the process give their feedback for change and improvement. And that's the knowledge that's going to drive those changes. So you want your sales team to go through this process and give feedback. You want marketing to utilize these fields. We're going to show you in just a second how to utilize those fields. We need that information from the end user to continuously update and make those changes. So schedule that, make that a priority. Just know that it's not a set it and forget it type of situation. All right, threw a lot of stuff in a very short period of time at you, but how does this affect me, Jen? I'm in marketing automation. I maybe dabble in Salesforce, maybe not. I really need to understand how this impacts me. All right, so let's take a look. Let's go back to our net new marketing queue nurture status and talk a little bit through this. So if the key fields that we selected are first name, last name, company, email title, business unit, Pardot score of 150, Pardot grade of A or B, then as a marketer, we know that we need to have all this information prior to moving to the next status. So that means we need all these fields represented on our forms, represented in completion actions or automation rules, or possibly items in our ES programs as well. Page layouts. Can't stress this enough. These page layouts, as you can see, mimic the path process. They mimic the fields. We have particular sections. Everything aligns. Configure your CRM to support your business process. This is going to help with training, going to help with adoption, and everyone is going to understand what to do during each part of the process. All right. We are going to sit on this slide for just a little bit and talk through some of the things that you can take away from the session today. How can I use statuses? So you told me I can use them in forms. Let's deep dive a little bit together. So one way I love to use these type of statuses are in my dynamic lists. You can create powerful segmentation. The example I used earlier, that if a contact is part of an opportunity and they have the SQC status, those might be in a suppression list. Or we might have a particular nurture program that we send out to those that are part of our opportunity process. Think about onboarding. If you have onboarding or kind of client services, perhaps there's a status that would allow you to make sure that you as a marketer are contributing to the onboarding process of a new client. Another way I'd love to use is creating dynamic lists for unique engagement studio programs. So we talked a little bit about that. For someone that has engaged with your content or maybe your chatbot experiences, we have an idea of maybe what their product of interest is. Use those dynamic lists along with statuses to move them from one program to another. So as we start to gather more information from those forms, from those fields, we can then move them from one program to another and track what they're engaging in at what status. This is also going to allow us to have a much bigger view on their journey from net new to opportunity. Another way I love to use this is our website forms. So each one of your website forms should be one-to-one experience. One-to-one forms, everybody. Be sure to use progressive profiling on your web forms because you might not want to ask all those questions on the very first form. All right, it's one of the most underutilized features of Pardot. Do not forget about progressive profiling. Now, each time they come, they're going to download more content. You can ask them a new question. These questions are then going to fill in those fields within that particular status. Of course, once those fields are complete, they're ready to move on to the next status. You are enriching the lead and contact records in Salesforce as a marketer, and now you and the sales team are working together to move this lead, this contact, this account along. All right, another way, completion actions on every form or landing pages. So maybe some of these questions we don't want to ask them, but we know the answers based on their activity or their engagement. And so we can utilize our completion actions to fill in these customer default fields based on their engagement with us. Do not forget about those completion actions. And lastly, another way that we can utilize these statuses is for all of you out there utilizing conversational marketing. Many of you use this type of chat tools, qualified.com or Drift. Many of you are not using it to enrich your Salesforce records. I've seen so many people create experiences with questions in their chat, and all of that information ends up in a conversation. Those should be tied to those fields. Ask those questions, change the labels, make it more conversational, but then push that information to your Salesforce fields. All right, so now that you know what key fields are, you can rework your experiences to support your overall process. That was a slam pam 20 minutes of information. I want to bring back Mike, start answering some of your questions from chat, and do a little bit of Q&A. Thank you guys so much for popping in and supporting ParDreamin and our amazing Ohana community. Mike, are you there? All right, I'm going to pop into chat here. Oh, looks like we've got him coming on board. There he is. How you doing?
Hey.
Hey.
Doing all right. That was a great session. Thank you. We have several questions. I'm going to first go into one. It's in chat before I lose it. Somebody does not use the lead. What's the advice to track the status and the lead conversion inside of a contact type? And it looks like several people are having that type of concern where they're not using the lead objects currently, and they want to do that lead process.
So if you're not using the lead object, and I'm assuming then that Pardot is automatically creating a contact for you, you can have that happen. Just contact your support team, and you can have that conversion happen with your Pardot tool. So that's going to help you immensely. And when you do, then just utilize your contact statuses like we did earlier. They might have to be modified a little bit. Your process may look a little bit longer, but utilize what you have. So if you only are working contacts, then just focus on developing that contact status. Look at the slides that I've given you and maybe kind of mesh some of those statuses together, those processes together. But that's probably where I would start.
Thank you. From pretty early on, what would you do with a lead that has a bounced email? Would you give it a particular status or just delete it?
I would not delete. There's a lot of different reasons for leads to have a bounced email. It could be an out of office, could be a server. They could have changed companies, but you still might want them part of your database to kind of follow them to what new company they're at. So there's a lot of other fields that can be utilized for things like bounces and opt-outs. So whether that's a checkbox field or a pick list dropdown, that should be completely synced with your Pardot. So when there's that hard bounce, so not a soft bounce, but a hard bounce, that should then sync over to the CRM lead record and populate that field, most of the time with a checkbox. This is a really great question and kind of starts to go into that segmentation. When you are pulling reports for leads and contacts to kind of understand what you have in your database, you're going to want to make sure that you have a template of filters you use. Do not call, do not email, hard bounce, inactive, no longer works at company. You can kind of mix and match between the statuses and the other lead fields that are important to your organization. Great question.
All right. What if we don't have an inside sales team? Should we wait until we get should we wait to get an SQL status based on lead score or something to pass?
I think
Did
you
I read
need
that
to
okay?
look at, yeah, no, I think I got where you guys were coming from. Think about your business process. Is it an 18-month process? Are you more transactional? So that's the first step. What does our conversion of opportunity process look like? And once we've determined whether it's a transactional or lengthy type of situation, you then can start to edit those statuses. And if you don't have that inside sales team, then marketing, you're probably doing double the effort. So you might have an MQL stage that says, okay, I've qualified that there's some interest and here's some pretty basic information. And maybe then once they hit that stage, you start to put them through nurtures that mimic the behavior that an inside sales team would do. So if you're familiar with like sales cadence type of software, you could emulate that behavior with an engagement studio. And so maybe there's a status between MQL and SQL where they're not really part of an opportunity, but they do have interest. Maybe we try to get them to convert with our engagement studio, giving them call to actions, sending them some downloadable contact, pushing them to our website with digital ads. So think about how you can create programs that might emulate what an inside sales team would do during that nurture process.
Nice. Good advice. Here's a good one. How do we change the contact status if an old customer or an old opportunity re-engages? Would we update the contact status to re-engage and then sales working?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about these contact statuses is you can go back, you can go forward, you can do whatever you want. So if someone is SQC, so they've been associated to an opportunity, that opportunity is closed won. You could utilize Process Builder or a workflow that says, hey, if my opportunity is closed, I'm going to reset my contact status. Or you could do a lot of different automations. There's a lot of creativity there. I actually hadn't thought about that till you just asked the question. So I'm kind of brainstorming right now, but you could do something automatically. You could also set a second set of threshold for things like Pardot score or engagement. So if they hit that initial score and they go through that process, but then you have another one at like 500, because they're going to continue to accumulate score, you could restart that process or put them in re-engaged. So what I would probably do is monitor how many contacts that were part of opportunities are re-engaging, see the frequency of that. And if you feel like that's happening a lot, create a solution. If it's only happening 20% of the time, don't create a solution for things that happen once in a while. Only create solutions for things that are happening more often. Because you'll still see that they're re-engaging. They'll still show up in your campaign membership and things like that.
Here's one that's closely related. Because we don't have a visual path on the contact object, we only have it for leads and opportunities. It's hard for sales to understand this contact nurturing process. What do you think?
Okay, so when you say, so you're not utilizing Path or you don't have access to the contact object?
There's not path. I agree. My understanding is we don't have path on the contact objects, only on leads and opportunities, right?
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
if
kind of
that's
asking
the case,
what can we do here?
Oh, Gotcha. Yeah. So the first thing I would do is I would probably take these slides or take your process for net new leads and showcase how well you've been able to document that and how structured that is, and really utilize that as a kind of catalyst to introduce this type of process to your company. Of course, it's going to take time. The first person you're going to want to talk to is your admin, and then you're probably going to want to get some of your early adopter sales folks that you've been helping out, that you guys are kind of working on the side, working together. Grab those pilot sales folks in, grab in your admin, pitch your idea, have your admin, your Salesforce admin kind of help maybe hone it in a little bit. There might be some things you're not thinking of, and then do a full-on presentation of saying, here's how we were able to watch a lead go through our process based on these statuses. We'd like to do this with sales, and here's why. And that's really the first place to start, is to have a well thought out plan, have backing by members of your team, and showcase the great results you've already done by utilizing paths on the lead object or opportunity object.
We're at our appointed time, but there's some more questions going in. I'd like to just continue and get some more of these great questions answered, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, guys.
All right. Here's one. At a high level, what is or are the core benefits of enabling lead path? Is it getting a better view of the funnel?
Absolutely. I love that. I think that's the big win-win chicken dinner type of thing. The second is obviously the reason why we had this episode today, and it is to align your processes. So many times I work with organizations where marketing is collecting this pool of information over here, and sales is collecting this pool of information over here. 3/4 of it is maybe synced, and there's frustrations between the teams of, why are we collecting that information? And the other team is like, well, why aren't you? If we continue to do that, we continue to silo ourselves as an organization. And if you don't think that the end user can feel that, they can absolutely feel that. So if we have 15 to 20 bits of information, remember how we lined up our fields with our statuses? We have 15 to 25 fields that we as a company need to know to be able to accelerate this business process and offer the best service or product to our end user. Then we should have our entire team focused on gathering that 15 to 20 fields of information. And so what lead path does and contact path does is it helps give us a visual to align what we're looking to capture. And it's a visual within the CRM system, which also drives home the thing that, hey, if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen. So documentation, adoption of your CRM, visual explanation, and the uniting of teams, that's really the first piece of why I love using the path.
All right. Can we do multiple paths for different teams using one Pardot instance?
So path is inside Salesforce, right? You have Salesforce Pardot. So at this point in time, moving forward, unless you're legacy and using selective sync, you would have one Pardot with multiple business units, but the contact path and lead path live in Salesforce. Now you do have the ability to create multiple paths. You'd have to probably look into account record type, access, different types of processes, right? So maybe I have more of a transactional thing online where I only have 3 statuses. Absolutely, but definitely need to work with your admin on that to coordinate of what business process, what type of lead, what type of contact will go through one path versus the other. So if you have business units, you're utilizing the business unit function, you could probably do that there. But we're need to consider things like permission sets, users, access, and record types. So we're kind of going into a bit of an admin deep dive there, but absolutely talk to your admin and understand a little further about what you can do. Great question.
All right, we have a couple on automations. What are the key automations you use when updating leads or contact statuses? Depending on the team, some salespeople forget to update the status. For example, there's new sales activity. When you move to the status of sales working, what do you recommend or don't recommend on automations around these motions?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. So there's 1,000 ways to slice this, and I think each And each individual company needs to probably deep dive in on themselves, but I'll give you some generic ones that can apply. First things first, don't forget your completion actions, right? Completion actions on forms, you can trigger so many updates on these fields, like a status field, manually by pushing it in based on some type of action. Another is automation rules that are fueling your grading and scoring or category scoring, right? If prospect record reaches this level and has these 4 fields filled in, change status to blank, we already know what 4 fields need to be filled in because they're aligned with our status. And if those 4 fields are filled in, then we're going to go ahead and automatically update that status. Always remember, guys, though, your automation rules and your dynamic lists are only going to affect the prospects within your Pardot database. So if you have a contact in Salesforce that has yet to be synced to Pardot, they may match that criteria. They're not going to be updated. So at that point, you either need to do one of the 2 things. Align your automation in Pardot with like Process Builder inside of Salesforce. So we're kind of doing the same thing if you don't want a full sync of your database. If you do want a full sync of your database, maybe you're SMB and you don't have that large of a database, then you know what, Pardot can go ahead and manage those things for you. Other items that can happen is, for instance, upon opportunity creation, you can create automation in Salesforce to update that particular status to SQC so that we know that that contact is related to an opportunity. Of course, they should be on the contact role as well, but another session, I digress. So there's a lot of things. Think about the trigger events, which is what? The fields in that information have been filled out. An opportunity is created. What other events trigger those statuses? And then try to automate that within Salesforce and Pardot.
Speaking of triggers and lots of methods, right? Yes. Our admin prefers Apex triggers. A lot of Apex triggers. What's the advantage of Path over Apex triggers?
All right. Well, I'm partial. I consider myself the declarative queen. I'm partial to declarative for a couple of reasons. And so this really talks about the Path. It's scalable and it's easily changed. Raise of hands, even though I can't see your beautiful faces. How many of you have been in an organization where your business process has changed? Like 5 times in a year, right? New leaders come in, new salespeople, new tools, new tech stack. Oh, hey, guess what? We're going to do this now. And this is our common goal. You need to be able to be nimble and change things. Oh, we now need to understand if they have red socks. Has to happen. We need to know if they have red socks. So we need to be able to add fields and take away fields and really edit our business process as our business grows, as our offerings grow. And remember when we talked about that quarterly update of somebody owning the Path, talking to sales and updating it? That's going to be a much less lift, a more collaborative lift, whereas Apex is you're going to have an on-demand developer at all times that not only can just build Apex, but understand your business process. There's a big difference between I can write code and make this work, and I understand why I'm writing the code and making it work. So I'm just a really big fan of being as declarative as possible. Hell to the yes. That's fantastic, Alyssa.
So we have a couple more questions in chat. One of them just showed up in the Q&A section. I will get to the others that are in chat as well. Let's say a salesperson's talking to a prospect initially, but they went cold for a few months and then started checking out a bunch of marketing resources and filled out a demo request form as a result. Should that be considered an MQL attributed to marketing or a sales influence lead? Are demo request forms commonly attributed to marketing, no matter what the actions that preceded it are?
So I think it depends on where they started. So let's say the salesperson added this person as a contact or lead manually. They're going to populate that status probably as an MQL, unless you have different statuses. So think we've got the status, but we have our other fields. So we can be an MQL with a lead source of sales referral. We can be an MQL with a lead source, initial lead source of webinar, and a last touch lead source of sales. So it's not just one field, right? Think about the multiple fields that you're utilizing on the lead object to get the entire picture. But let's walk through this. Let's say we labeled them an MQL, sales created them. We have an initial lead source of actually webinar because we did a webinar with them 3 months ago. And then sales met them or talked to them on a Zoom conference, it's 2020, and changed the most recent update to sales referral because they wanted to get credit for this. And they went cold. So they're sitting at MQL status. Now, depending on that period of time and the automation that you recur, we might actually have them as re-engaged at this point. So if it's 3 months or 6 months or whatever time frame that is, think about those things. Again, this isn't an exact science. So let's say you say anybody with an MQL that hasn't engaged in the last 45 days, I'm going to actually demote their status back. Or if they engage again after that 45 days, I'm going to call it re-engaged because that's basically what they've done. So those are the type of things to think about. Great questions. I would start mapping those out. So, you know, on the screens where I had all of the different statuses, you might want to put like a table together and then on the right side, put down in 25 days or 45 days, this happens. And then do that for 3 months. Document, boy, that didn't work, or wow, didn't see that coming, and then adjust. That's why this isn't like a set it and forget it situation. But to answer it very quickly, I would call that a re-engaged status, and then let your lead sources kind of dictate where that lead or contact came from.
We have a good one from a solo marketer. What if I'm the only marketer in my company? How can I process all of the leads we receive and nurture them for my sales team without going crazy?
Well, as you have all of your hats on, you need to probably compartmentalize and segment a little bit broader than others. So your automation rules and your statuses, maybe you're going to have less statuses and more criteria for them. So there's probably the majority of that bucket have gone to a webinar. Unfortunately, 2020, right? We have all these virtual events. We have a ton of people that may have a little extra time in their hands, or they're doing more research, or they're rediscovering their passions. And so we have a lot of folks that are consuming content, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested in us. Just means that, you know, they're kind of checking out what's out there. So your criteria for your scoring and grading and what changes a status needs to up its level. So not only is the engagement score, but maybe work on using Pardot grading to help you. And the grading then can be based on if they're a fit for your company. And I will guarantee that probably 35 to 40% of those leads are going to be kind of sitting in that, I checked you out on a webinar, but not really interested. And then when you get to look at the smaller chunk of folks that actually go into the other statuses because they have a grade of A or B, because we know more about them, that's going to be a much more manageable chunk for you. And utilize your cues. Utilize your cues. Utilize your cues. Yep.
All right, last one. We're going to try to see if we can keep it under 15 minutes over. What if a contact opted out from a specific public list, not unsubscribed? How can I determine if the contact status? How can I determine the contact status in this record? So this is going back as part of one of the earlier questions.
Okay, so if you opted out of a public list, and this public list is on your preference center, as long as it's not a complete opt-out. So if it's complete opt-out, that should be syncing to the contact record with a checkbox of opt-out true, and we shouldn't even be considering communicating to these people. If it's just a particular preference list that they've opted out, that has technically nothing to do with the status unless you make it to do with the status. Someone can still be very engaged, be an MQL or another status, and just choose not to get your newsletter. So remember, we have multiple things. Remember the quiz that we did in the beginning of the presentation. It's not just knowing the status fields and the pick list values. What is all the information that encompasses our lead or contact objects, and how do I use multiple fields to tell a full story?
Great. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate your presentation. That's all the questions we have at this point.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for chatting back. Have a wonderful day. And thank you, ParDreamin, again, to having me part of this awesome experience. Take care, all. Bye-bye.